What does he say in Friday Night Lights? You win, you move on. You lose, you play basketball.
I just was playing because I love the game. And it's scary to me.
It's really easy for the game to become a job.
Below 6 in his hands, listless now.
Man, kids out there playing the game, staying out of trouble, competing. I love it.
Now that you're no longer in the dungeon of depression, you've had time to reflect on your season, Travis. Let's talk about it.
Yeah, the Rebel season came to an end last week, first round of the playoffs. And I mean, no coach is ever going to be okay with losing, as was ingrained in me when I was at Baylor by Coach Kaz. I hate losing more than I enjoy winning. And, but with time as it passes, you kind of look back and reflect, and you realize that a lot of good things happened this year. And, we saw a big change, and, year 1 to year 2 was the jump that we needed as a program, and that, I needed as affirmation that I kind of know what the heck I'm doing. So, to go from 3-7 in year 1 to 8-3 in year 2, it was a good feeling for sure, but didn't end how we wanted it to. But what's up?
Are you going to graduate a lot of kids, or?
Yeah, we graduate 13 seniors, and we return 1 touchdown on offense.
You returned 1 touchdown?
Yeah. So
literally.
Yeah, no, that's not an exaggeration. We graduate every passing yard, every receiving yard, and I think we return 80 yards rushing.
So there's a lot of shoes to fill.
Yeah, a lot of opportunity for young guys to prove that they can go out there and play.
Wow. Well, yeah, that process has got to start pretty quickly then for you.
Yeah, we had a week between this past week. We had a week between the season ending and leaving for Thanksgiving break. So kind of took it easy, took it light. And when we get back from Thanksgiving, we'll hit the ground running, lifting 4 days a week, running every day. And then when we come back in January, we'll start drilling the playbook and doing all those things to start over.
That's this is just more out of curiosity. Most strength coaches, they don't start phase 1 until January, right? It's almost like get to December is your pre-phase. I don't even know what you call it, but you don't really want to start phase 1 then, do you?
No. The way I've kind of looked at it is end of season to December is you got to rebuild, the attrition. So it's the reintroduction into off-season weights, that routine. But you're building block by block instead of, all at the same time. We've got to reintroduce that and remind them that we run, and then kind of install that routine to hopefully they carry it through Christmas break. Then when we come back in January, that's my off-season phase 2 or phase 1.
Got it.
Is January, to mid-February. Mid-February, you're going to start track. Track introduces phase 2, because you got to change how you run, and you don't tweak the weight room very much, but you got to change how you run. And then phase 3 is post-district meet through the end of school, which is depending on how many guys advance and how long track goes, is your timeline to introduce spring football. And if you're a big school that actually formally has it, you set your practice schedule, this, that, and the other. But if you're a small school and you don't formally have it, you introduce your skills and drills, verbiage, meetings, things of that nature. And then phase 4 being the summer, and the summer setting you up to go into August. So that's always kind of been my approach. But that's also because I've been at a school that every single one of those stops is including, that's encompassing 80% of your program. Your athletic program, not just your football team. Everybody's going to lift, right? And then everybody's going to run track, and a lot of them are going to advance. So we kind of have to tailor our scheduling around that as we move into phase 3 and things like that.
Yeah. Interesting. It's so here we have a strength coach, and even when we had, renowned strength coach Luke Richardson, back in 2019. He was the head strength coach for the Broncos and Jaguars and all that stuff. And so um, even whenever we had him, I remember, and our season ends way, way earlier than in Texas. And so I just remember like December coming from Texas, you're involved as you may not be the strength coach, but you're involved in the weights. You're walking around, you're checking technique, whatever. And I remember when I got here in 19, it was funny because like he literally was like, I don't want to see you guys. Do not come into the weight room. They're tired of you. It's only me. And dude, so the rest of November, December, January, February, like obviously January, February, we had like small meetings, but like as far as like weight room goes, it's like, dude, y'all do not step foot in this weight room. So totally new, obviously for me, because like I was used to having to jump in that, but
I don't even know how I would respond to that. Like I don't in that environment. I'm not saying obviously Coach Richardson knows what the heck he's doing, but like
yeah.
I've never, for a decade now, shoot, even when we were at Tarleton, like as GAs, like
Yeah.
you're in there, you're checking on the kids. I remember when I was at Baylor and like, the OC, the DC, your position coaches, they're coming in and out. They're checking on guys. How you feeling? Do you get enough water? Make sure you stretch. Hey, blah, blah, blah. Come see me for this. I don't know how I wouldn't know what to do with my hands.
I know it's interesting. I will say like the cool thing that it did give the kids, like where they have seasons of sports, they also have seasons now of like relationships. Like I do think the season of your relationship with your kids should be it should be ongoing. It should never stop, and it doesn't here. But like it's like all of a sudden it goes from the main relationship at the forefront of a daily basis in football season as your coach, as your position coach, and that's all you hear. And then all of a sudden, like, boom, into November, December hit, really December, January, the main relationship and the voice that they hear on a daily basis is the strength coach. So then when they do hear our voices again, it's kind of like a breath of fresh air. So like you're kind of having that interchanging there that I would say keeps the kids, more in tune to what you're saying.
For sure. Yeah. I think there's obvious positives. I think it's like anything. It's as good or as bad as you set it up to be. If it's an unstructured, undisciplined environment that they're moving into and not seeing y'all, then obviously you're going to lose a lot of ground. But if it's structured and approached and executed the right way, there's always going to be positives into any well thought out plan. So it's just freaks me. I mean, because like I said, for a decade now, I wouldn't if I didn't see, if I didn't see my captains or like my returning dudes, if I didn't see them from, December to late January, I'd be freaking out. Like, do they still go to school here? Like,
Yeah.
do we know them? Are they upset? Like, be like a worried girlfriend.
I know.
But I think
we still talk to him. I'm just saying it's not like we're not. It's not like I see him in March and it's like, hey man, haven't seen you since December. Like,
yeah,
I'll pop through the weight room and be like, hey, what's going on? Like I still text all my guys, but as far as like, I guess I'm not coaching them in like, all right, I've coached in football season. Now I'm going to coach you on how to do the power clean. And the only coaching voice you're hearing is me. It's like they won't hear me coaching them for, as far as like on the field goes and on really anything goes except for maybe film. They won't hear that for the next 2 to 3 months.
yeah. So the only interaction you're having with them is relational. It's not,
Which is kind of cool.
yeah, for sure. Which that's much more collegiate than, I just think about like not being around. It just, cause that's just not what I've done for 9-10 years. When I was in Salina, it was, you get a week to get stuff turned in, and it doesn't matter if you lose in the 3rd round or the 5th round. Like, you get a week to get stuff turned in, and then, we're coming back 6:30 in the morning. We're hitting weights. You got a group. Here's your guys. Start, fostering that next wave and getting those young guys ready, et cetera, et cetera. So you're like, that's the environment where it's like it's always football season. Like, track is football season, and off season is football season, because you're relational, but you're also, technical. It's you're still coaching them And for me, what that always presented is like, okay, let me take this. Oh, okay, we're doing power cleans, right? Or we're doing high pulls. All right, let's talk about how this is going to relate to the game. Let's talk about how this is going to relate to quarterback play, and we get to, kind of pull those extra 30, 45 seconds that they just stack up, talking ball, talking technique. And then, you throw the note card down and be like, hey, if I was a guy that had 45 minutes before I needed to get dressed for class and I just finished lifting, this is what I would go do, type thing. And then you go sit on the balcony and you watch and you see if they do it and see how much better they get at it. So that's the environment that that's the only thing I've known. And so I think it would definitely be a double-edged sword of like a breath of fresh air of being able to just like, the only thing that you're talking to them about is, hey, how are you? How's class going? How's your mom? How's your dad? Blah, blah, blah. But I would assume I'd get the itch pretty fast of like, all right, let's, get up here and watch some tape.
Correct.
Let me see you front squat.
Yeah. Correct.
But I think that, that leads into the other thing that I wanted to talk about just as I finishing up season 2 as a head coach. Still being very new to this step in the profession, and not wanting to sound cheesy or, like a tagline. Like the longer I do this, the more that I realize that this is true. Like it's really hard to become a head coach, but there's a lot of head coaches, which sounds counterintuitive. But even though there's a lot of head coaches, there's not a lot of great head coaches. And that doesn't make those guys bad people. I think that especially at the high school rank, though, I think it's you have to be very mindful of a lot of things to be a great head coach. And the reason that that's been on my mind is because I think that that's the obvious foundation of like what my long-term goals are. Like there's not a number of wins. There's not a number of like district titles or state titles or anything like that. I want to get to a point where consistently year after year, the program is doing things that produces great players, but great people. And if you're going to have those two things, I think you got to be a head coach. And I just look around and like some of the things that happened late in the season that have happened around the state and playoff games. It's just, and obviously you don't want to hold a grown man head coach accountable for the actions of one like nuanced, troubled kid. But, it's like you said years ago, you're either coaching it or allowing it. And I think the world, the football world, the high school football world needs to be more in tune with that concept that even though there's a lot of head coaches out there, there's not a lot of great ones. So make sure that when you go in your search to find your next head coach, that you're looking for a great head coach, not a head coach.
Yeah, I agree. I've been hanging out with Coach Lee a lot the last couple of weeks, which I'm grateful for because, obviously they had LSU this week and they got Tennessee next week. And now that our season's over with, and I look at him as one of my main mentors, like the fact that last week he was like, yeah, come hang out to practice with me if you want. It's like, dude, you don't have to, like, I'm nobody. You don't have to do that. Like, like you worry about LSU or whatever, you know what I mean? So like, I'm grateful for him. And we've been talking a lot lately, and him and I were discussing this, and he was saying one of the biggest pieces of advice he ever got as a head coach was, hey, just know that as you enter this business, the most important thing that you have to obtain is self-reliance and self-confidence on who you are. Because the moment that, and obviously I can't speak to this, but the moment that you become a head coach, everybody will have their own opinion on how you should be running that thing. And you got to do a great job of listening and hearing, but more importantly, you have to do a good job of like, this is who I am. This is my vision. I'm open for criticism and feedback. But he was like, if you don't know who you are, there's no way that you can lead other people. The only way that you can lead people is if you can lead yourself first. And that kind of transition into, me bringing up, I was like, I think when you enter in this business as a head coach, like you can swallow the red pill or you can swallow the blue pill. Whether it's the red pill is transaction and the blue pill is transformation. Only one of those pills, in my opinion, you can get both from. I do think most coaches get the red pill because of how transactional all this stuff is. Um, and I think as you swallow that red pill, you lose sight and vision on how to treat people, how to handle business. Because at the end of the day, this is like ultimately you're learning how to treat people, and these people have families. Head coaches, these assistant coaches have families. Like you got to learn how to handle those things with the forefront of your mind being, how am I impacting this coach and his family? How am I impacting this kid and his family? Knowing that the transaction being the scoreboard is a byproduct of the transformation that you have at hand. Um, and so it's interesting to me when I'm looking at the head coaches, it's like, oh man, he chose to go the blue pill route, and it's going to take a couple of years to start seeing the results, but it's going to happen. And as a result, there's a program of longevity. It's like, oh man, he swallowed the red pill, and they're probably going to win pretty fast, but they're going to crumble even quicker. And so it's just, again, I've never been a head coach, but it's just interesting for me to be able to see that.
Yeah, and I think that there's, broad overstatement. I think that there's two really generic categories that you get put in as a head coach. You can learn how to drive a car, or you can learn how to build a car. Right? That's what you can do. But what I do know is that if you go through the process of learning how to build a car, which is going to take a little bit longer, you're going to know how to drive it as well.
That's right.
And if you just know how to drive the car, you're probably going to struggle if you got to fix something. And I think that those are the categories that you end up in. If, there's guys that come from programs, and it's, you pick a level, high school, college, NFL. There's guys that come from programs or franchises, however you want to word it, that have won a lot of games, that have done a lot of good things, that have won championships. And then they go and they get the opportunity to be a head coach, and they can't replicate those same results. Well, there's a few different reasons that comes into play, but the main one is if they're not approaching every day the right way, they're never going to have a chance to be successful.
Yeah.
The other part of that is if they're trying to be somebody that they're not, they're never going to be successful. And I think that's the really hard thing to do is you got to figure out who you are. You got to be confident in who you are. And like last year, there were moments, they were not brief either, where I didn't know, am I any good at this? Do I have any idea what I'm doing? Or have I just been walking around with just ridiculous level of like ill-advised confidence for years? And now reality is setting in. You go through those moments when things aren't going great. But I'll be honest, if I don't go through that, if we as a program don't go through that, we don't get this year. And I wholeheartedly believe that. And there's a lot of different details and factors that go into that. But the fact of the matter is that last year's struggles set me up to handle this year's successes and different adversities that came with it and conversations that needed to be had. But I also think that one thing that's really hard for coaches to accept, acknowledge, and understand is that, and I don't care what level it is, high school, college, junior high, it's a harsh reality to accept the fact that, you're going to have to rely on kids that just like football. That not every kid that you need to show up on 4th and 1 loves football. And that's scary and it's hard. And, you can spend your career getting upset about it and frustrated, but it's only going to have a negative impact on you. Like, you can't make that kid love it.
Yeah.
If once they reach that point, they are who they are within their relationship with the game. Now, they can be held accountable for expectations and discipline and effort and things like that. But you can't make a 16-year-old who's just liked the game or plays because all of his buddies play. You can't make him all of a sudden wake up one day and be like, I love it. This is the only thing I've ever worried about. I'm so glad I see the light. You can't do that. And you have to accept that, or it's just going to lead to a lot of sleepless nights for you and you only.
100%. I think it's like the longer that I'm in this business, the more that I see, like the teeter totter effect and like how there is that balance that you always have to, look at, whether it's like, we put a little sand over here, put a little sand over here. And it's like, okay, if I know this, exhibit A, this kid here doesn't love football, he just kind of likes it. Well, what role am I going to give him? Because that role is like super important. Like, I think it'll be the best thing for the team, but then you also got to consider like, well, how good is he though too? Like in your case here, it's like you beggars can't be choosers. And if you don't have so many kids at your disposal, it's like, well, yeah, like this kid doesn't love football, but his talent is here compared to the backup. And it's like, but if I give him this much of a responsibility, if he doesn't handle it, like, and understand how much responsibility he has, like, that ain't going to be good for the team. I have much of a choice. How can I get this to get back to here? Like, that's hard.
Yeah. And it's like, coming from Salina, where A, there's way more kids.
Yeah.
But B, it's a community of expectations. And the harsh reality is that like that's the exception, that's not the norm. There's a handful of those places that exist in the state that have that level of expectation from 6th grade on, from 2nd grade on. And if you come in and you just try and push those expectations on a bunch of kids who have never been held to that standard, you're going to lose more than you win of the relationships, not of the games. And it's a hard, like you said, it's a hard balance to come out with. But I think that that's what this year became for me, is that it was so much less about the X's and O's. And it was so much more about the relationships with the Jimmies and the Joes,
Yeah.
and those relationships being fostered off the field. How is school? How is home? How are grades? How are, what's going on in the locker room, this, that, and the other. And there were situations where, we as coaches watch tape and we're like, man, with the way that they play defense, they're susceptible to something like this. But do you have time, and do you have the football IQ to master that in 3 days?
Right.
And unfortunately, the harsh reality is most often than not, the answer is no, and you've got to figure out how to take what they already know, sprinkle some fairy dust on it and some smoke and mirrors, and make it look a little bit different, but still teach it in a way that they're like, oh, this is the same thing. I feel totally confident still. I don't have to relearn football in 72 hours. I can just trust what I've been doing.
Right.
And when you're in a situation where you can just like watch, 10 games of your opponent and be like, all right, here's their vulnerabilities. We're going to install this list of 12 plays because it attacks their specific vulnerabilities. And you have kids who have grown up in an environment that's fostered that expectation and that football knowledge. Well, by all means. But again, that those places are the exception, not the rule. And you've, as a coach, once you reach the point of understanding that and you change your approach to those situations, your kids are going to have more success. They're going to play more confident. And although you may not get the outcome you want every single time, you're going to be able to live with yourself in that mental state a lot easier than, trying to force that square peg into a round hole.
Yeah, agreed. Speaking of football, how about college football this weekend?
Yeah, I mean, it's Florida and Kansas are just out to just ruin everything, and I'm here for it.
As I say,
Florida is now the
I shouldn't
only
say it
team
got
with a
ruined. It's more
it's
fun.
hilarious. I love it.
Yeah.
Florida is now the only team with a losing record that has 3 wins over top 25 programs. They're what, 4-6, 5-6, and they have 3 AP top 25 wins.
Yeah.
That's not a real stat. And then Florida has beat LSU, Ole Miss, and the SEC is still completely up for grabs. Bama losing to a 5-5 OU team, and Jackson Arnold's back on the field, playing well. Except for, I will say this, because we got to talk about this before we circle back to the topic. Did you see the blown call on the Bama touchdown?
I did.
That I mean, there has to be a level of accountability. There has to be some sort of structure of accountability in the officials, like management or governing body. That guy's got to be held accountable in some form or fashion, because
that wasn't even close.
no.
Like it was a 4-by-0 formation.
Hold on. Speak English.
So it was an unbalanced formation. Everybody was on the right side of the field.
There we go.
But like it was very obvious, like two guys here, one like it wasn't like, oh, he's kind of covered up here. No, like it was clear who was on and who was off.
Yeah, by like a yard.
Because like I get it. Like a lot of times for schematical reasons, when you get into what we call like a 4-by-0 formation or an unbalanced formation, there's times to where you want to be legal, but like sometimes you might want to like really crowd that line for schematic purposes. But they weren't. Like it was very obvious like who was on, who was off. And so when they said like illegal touching, I was like, what are we talking about right now? Like I'm so confused that what do you like from a procedure perspective, they were okay, which obviously that's why, DeBoer was losing his mind, as he should. Do I think that would have changed the game? I mean, nobody knows. I mean, you could obviously football's a game of momentum, and there's a chance. And I've seen crazier things happen with that a lot of time, where that's the spark that you need to go boom, 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 boom. So like maybe, but irregardless of whether it's going to change the game or not, to your point, the accountability factor of it's got to be handled better than that, because I was asinine.
Yeah, and the account or the ripple effect of it being that, like, okay, it's 24-10, it's a 2-possession game, and we've got a whole quarter left to play. We know that I think Bama got like 4 more possessions after that, but it's, you sit there and you look at it and you're like, that's not getting the points taken off the board is not the issue. The issue is that this is a blatant mistake by the officials, and when a player has a mistake, it's reviewable, but we're going to sit here and say that the officials aren't reviewable. And like, I understand it. It's subjective. Being an official is an extremely hard thing to do, but I also know that there was an umpire in the World Series that called a perfect game behind the plate. So you can't sit here and tell me that it's not feasible to get close to that. And the ability to, if we're going to hold the players accountable, we got to be able to hold the refs accountable too from a review standpoint. That would be a very easy, because the play continued, the result was confirmed, right? Like there was no gray area about who had the ball, who did this. It wasn't a fumble or anything like that. All they have to do is go to all 22 and go, no, he's 100% legal, touchdown, go for the extra point. And that was a bad look. That was a really bad look. And I never want to be the coach that, like, because DeBoer's, his body language, his emotional state, how he managed the rest of the game, 1000% was altered by the outcome of that decision. Mm-hmm. And you can tell based off of how he responded to it, and right, wrong, or indifferent, there, you can't deny the ripple effect that it had in the game management from that standpoint.
Correct.
But yeah, that was, there's been enough light shed on it to where there's got to be something to address it in some form or fashion. But it's just, especially for it to be the line judge on the OU sideline, it's not good.
Well, how late he threw it to.
Well, the only justification I've seen for that is it doesn't become illegal touching till he touches it.
Oh, really?
So
makes sense.
You know what I mean? So,
yeah,
that's the, like, when he threw it, it shouldn't really, I think, I mean, don't quote me on that, but I don't think that should be as much of an issue as, no, you're just wrong. Mm-hmm. And what would be really interesting would be to see the all 22, if it shows it enough, if that outside guy goes up there and puts his hand back.
Yeah.
Because if he does that and the ref doesn't say anything, now you're pouring salt on the wound. Because if that was the case, all you have to do is say, no, back up more, and then we're all good. So,
well, if he puts his hand back and that guy still threw it, obviously there's somebody in Vegas that guy's in association with. So,
100, yeah, exactly. Now to circle back to, I want to talk more about the Big 12 though. the last thing that I read was that after yesterday, there are 9 teams of the 14 in the Big 12, which, conversation for another day, but there are 9 teams still alive in the Big 12 title race. So because there are no divisions, top 2 teams make the Big 12 championship. And because Colorado lost, and there was another team that lost, that technically there are 9 teams still alive in the race to make the Big 12 championship, which is hilarious and absurd. Mm-hmm. And I think it's a double-edged sword. I think that, you and I kind of talked about this. I think that it's the portal and NIL has become the great equalizer, but I also think that I think the level of football, like the fine-tune, like detail-oriented level of football has taken a step back. I don't think that everybody went like this. I think there was this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because historically great disciplined programs are making mistakes that are very uncharacteristic. And I think it's because they're not having those kids for 3 years before they start a game. And, which right, wrong, or indifferent, that's a whole nother can of worms. But I do think it's extremely exciting to see Kansas go in there and just week by week be just the best team with a losing record in the country. Yeah. But also to have that many teams going into the last weekend or 2 weekends, I can't remember how many games are left, but for there to be 9 teams alive in that race is just insane to me.
Yeah. Well, across the board, like every conference, like in, the main ones, obviously like SEC, Big 12, Big 10, whatever. Like looking at them yesterday, it's like, I remember in the years past, you would hope that there would be one game, just one. It was like, man, this is going to mess up the polls this week. And I'm curious to see how that's going to happen. As of recent, this year specifically, it's like every weekend there's 3 or 4 in every conference. It's like, well, the whole thing's jacked up now. You know what I mean? Like it regardless of division or conference, it's like you're guaranteed to get 3 or 4 games a weekend from somebody in the AP top 10 that is going to get beat. Whereas like in years past, it's like very rare at this time of the year, like very rare.
Yeah, if you get to this point in the season and a top 10 team loses, it's like a huge deal.
Yeah. Right.
Like I remember in 2012 when Notre Dame made the national championship, I want to say it was this late in the season, but K-State, who was number 1, lost, and Oregon lost in overtime to Stanford. So 1 and 2 lost in the same weekend, and it was like, I mean, it was memorable enough to where I can talk about it. So, right. And that was 12 years ago. Which, for our boy Capron, hindsight, both of them losing was a terrible thing because then Notre Dame gets Bama in the national championship instead of the Optimus Klein, Kansas State Wildcats, or the Oregon Ducks, who they would have matched up exponentially better than. Right. That's been there. AJ McCarron's been doing a lot more of that Siski and I can't think of the other guy's name on their like radio show type thing. And I saw one where he was talking about when they made the national championship after they won the SEC championship and they were going to play Notre Dame. He was like, I just remember watching them being like, they suck. And I was like, geez. Because that was like, I mean, they were big picture, 120 Division I programs. Like that defense was really good. And AJ McCarron is just watching film like, these guys suck. I was like, geez, that's brutal. But
they were different.
I watched the second half of that game from the sideline. And by the time I got in, the threes are in. And TJ Yeldon's like a redshirt freshman. He's playing running back. And he looks like the Hulk. And he's not even their big back, right? Derrick Henry was on that team. And TJ Yeldon still looked like a man amongst not even boys, but like toddlers. And it's like, fellas, what's in the water in Tuscaloosa? This is absurd. Yeah. I'm sitting there as like, I'm 10 months removed, 12 months removed from playing Big 12 football. And I was like, Jesus Christ, what is going on over here?
Yeah,
But
it was the NIL team before NIL became a thing.
no, the NIL team before NIL became a thing was early 2000s USC.
Well, no, well, yeah, yeah, and yeah, them and
I mean,
yeah, them. But yeah,
Shady McCoy telling the story about his visit to USC and how, because Reggie Bush was on there like, I didn't get anything. I drove a Crown Vic to class. And they're like, that's not what
Yeah.
was parked outside of that downtown LA apartment high rise that I went and hung out with you at. He was like, well, that wasn't mine. I lived in the dorms. It's like, oh, okay, cool. You gonna tell the truth or you gonna be funny? Like in all those guys talking about how, Snoop would call and make sure they were taken care of. Hey, do you need anything? Blah, blah, blah. Like, but that's all of those situations and people saying, oh, that's against the rules. That's illegal. That's what's led us to the college football world we have now, where you got, 5-star quarterbacks committing to Michigan for $10.5 million over 4 years.
yeah, yeah. It was 12, wasn't it?
Is it 12? I thought it was 10.5.
I could be wrong. I could have swore. I mean, it doesn't matter. It's obviously, over $10 million, but it's like, dude, what's going on?
Yeah. I mean, but here's what's crazy. And I know that it's similar to the pre-NIL world where like you're getting recruited. So like you can talk to anybody, you can hear what they have to offer, all these situations. But if you're on a roster, you can't. And, Matt Rule last year said, if you go get a transfer portal quarterback, it's going to cost you $1 million, at the Division I level. And every coach being like, okay, we know that's true, but you don't have to say it. Now it's going to be more. And
Correct.
My question is, how's a kid confident enough to go into the portal to get one of those $1 million NIL deals at a new school without having any prior knowledge?
Yeah, I mean that's what I was gonna say. Like, ain't none of these kids get in the portal without having contact with coaches. Like, not. I mean, and if there is a dude doing that, he's probably in the portal for a while.
Right.
These dudes are jumping in. They've already had conversations, many, and if it's not them, it's their agent. The big boys now got the agents, and they're the ones that are doing all the conversing now and getting the deals done and making sure the deal is done before he jumps into the portal.
But what does that look like as somebody that spent 2 years, 2 seasons or I guess 2 recruiting seasons dealing with this? What does that look like? Like, what do those conversations sound like? Because you obviously can't talk to the kid.
Right.
Like, is it, hypothetically, if we were to go after a kid that measured at this and this and, wore this number and threw right-handed and, we would offer him something that looked like this. Like, is that what does it sound like?
Yeah. Well, when you're talking specifically about the quarterbacks, like I said, most of them now have agents. And that's where all the dealing is kind of going on right now. But because this whole thing was just kind of, okay, here you go, here's NIL, and there's no structure to it, but there are some legal boundaries. Like all the coaches, I mean, there's ways that everybody gets around it, whether they're talking to the street agent or they're talking to the actual agent or they're talking to the uncle who wants a part of the deal as well. And so long that he's the one telling the kid that this is how much he's getting, that he has to get this much % of it. Like, the conversation that you're going to have will vary between every single kid that you're talking to. But primarily the ones with the quarterback, they're all done. Even the backups now, they're all done with agents now. And that's who the GMs are talking to, before the whole thing kind of is done.
See, and that's what's just, you're creating these environments. Because, like, I mean, look, how do you know who to talk? How do you know you're sitting in that office, right? GM says, hey, I need you to gather info on, Johnny Tambourine from Utah State. We're going to look at bringing him in.
Yeah.
How do you know which conversation is real? Hey, is it the uncle? Is it the dad? Oh, well, there's this agent saying that he's speaking on his behalf. How do you know which one is true? And how do you know Do you give them all the same information? Or do you give them 3 different pieces of information and see which one the kid, comes back and then that's who is telling the truth and that's who to stay with? Like what's the approach? What's the game plan there?
Yeah. Well, what sucks is if you're a school that has integrity like a Vanderbilt or something like that, then obviously you're going to get cheated out by a lot more prior conversing from the other schools who, have chosen to have all those conversations before the portal. Um, and so you don't know what is real. I mean, you don't know if this kid that's telling you Kentucky's going to give him an extra 50. You don't know if that's real or not. You're just hoping that it is, and that when you go back and say that, yeah, they're bumping him up an extra 50, can we bump him up 75? That you're not getting screwed by the kid. But the families are the ones that are starting to try to get involved more because they're just using these kids, which is obviously so dirty. But yeah, it's the other thing too, where the kids are starting to get smart is like your big time quarterbacks are starting to try to get the agents of the big coaches. Right. So like, this is where it gets pretty dirty, right? So like, not to like put too much out there, but if I'm a big time quarterback and my agent, I know that my agent represents 5 different head coaches as well, or potential head coaches as well. Like, you're now starting to navigate and you're starting to hear, hey, so and so is about to fire his OC, so you don't want to go there because I know that dude's agent or he represents him as well, and he already has been told by the head coach who I represent he's about to fire him, so don't go there, go here. Like, that's where all this is starting to kind of get dirty too. So you're having these big time quarterback agents that are the same agents as some of the head coaches in Big Ten or SEC, and all these agents talk amongst each other, and they all know the game and what's going on, and they're going back and telling the kid, hey, I know these they're offering you this much, but that coordinator's about to get fired, so let's maybe wait another week or 2 before they see who they're going to hire, and then go from there. So that's the other kind of rabbit hole that's happening.
See, and that's the part. I mean, we've said it before. We've said it a dozen times. Like there's got to be, until some level of regulation gets put back into this thing, we're not going to get like what is the normal process. But like, I just can't fathom a world where like there's got to be, and I don't know what the restrictions are. Like, there's got to be some sort of communication before a kid makes a jump like that, like into the portal, out of the portal, like not going into the portal. There's got to be some. What did the Colorado State guy said that like somebody from Kansas State had contacted his guy about like, hey, we'll get you this much money if you jump in the portal and come to K-State, and then the whole K-State staff is like, that wasn't us, but it's so like I'm just curious as to what would be the NCAA's version of like, restrictions on that. Is like, okay, obviously the kid can't talk to a coach from another staff, right, but can dad, because that's the whole thing that got Cam Newton put under investigation, or can a close friend just start making phone calls?
Yeah.
Like, because I remember having those even before the portal, like was the portal to transfer, you did the same thing. You had like guys were looking around, like, where can I dip my toe? And like, who can I get somebody to have a backdoor conversation? And like, but how real are those? And how do you hold them accountable? Like, hey, if you jump in the portal and sign with us, we'll get you, 1.5 for a year for your last 2 years of eligibility if you come play quarterback here. And then the kid gets there and it's like, or the kid jumps in the portal and signs with them and they're like, all right, well, here's $750. And he's like, well, you told me 1.5. And it's like, yeah, well, you signed the paper too late. Right. What's the civil like accountability there to, I don't know. It just, the more things.
The schools are smart. They're doing it like you're saying, as far as they're not being smart. I mean, they're being smart as to not having a paper trail, but like they are, who's our most trustworthy source that is a 5th or 6th party, element away from the kid that we can talk to, so that we can't get hit by, oh yeah, they were talking to the kid or they're talking to whoever, right there. So like, they're very smart about, hey, like, I'm talking to his trainer's best friend. He's telling the trainer's telling the kid, we're good. Like, that's that's kind of the depths of what they go into as far as from what I've been told from how they're handling it. So
It's just every day college football gets more and more interesting, and
yeah,
it's I can't remember who I was listening to, but either a current or recent former head Division One coach, Power Five coach, was like, you guys can't desire and seek business operation type structure and then get upset when they begin to operate like a business,
right,
you know,
right,
because you can't have your cake and eat it too. You can't get the money and then be upset when, bottom line decisions are made.
right.
But that's, that comes back to the whole reason that they're going down to 105 straight scholarship guys. And like, that's 15 to 25 kids that are on Division One rosters right now that are come August 2025 are, they're now you got Division One walk-ons in the portal
Right.
potentially. And like, where are they going to go? How much money are they going to get? They going to go take over, and then you got the, what was it? Mississippi College that they just disbanded their program after the last game. They're like, we're not doing football anymore. And they've had a football program for like 110 years. And they're citing that the NIL environment is just, it's going to lead to a physical loss for the school and they're not going to do it. And you just sit there and you're like, I mean, these are the consequences of our actions. And, people are upset about it and I get it. But at the same time, this is what you said you wanted. This is what the vast majority, the general population said you wanted. And now you're upset about the consequences of your own decisions.
Yeah.
And so it creates very interesting topics of conversation moving forward, because how are you going to handle it? But also, how are you going to navigate the people that are upset about this new world order of college football?
Yeah. Obviously there's going to be a massive change, I think, in the next couple of years that we'll see within football. I don't know what it's going to be. I think structurally there will be a massive change. But what I do know is it has created just such an interesting outcome from a weekly basis. Like, we're going into week 12 now, and just normally your week 12 wasn't as interesting as what it's about to be now across the board at every level. Like, yeah, normally, like, obviously, like your SEC, that'd be an interesting game. Maybe just the conference championships are an interesting game, whatever, right? But like your week 12s have never really been this interesting it's all still like out there, for most of these teams, and it can all change this weekend. That's just hadn't been the case. So, but it has, provided for the fans like us as outside looking in. It's way more interesting.
Last thing I want to talk about is it's got to do with recruiting, but it's from a different angle.
Okay.
And it's been something that I've asked questions behind the scenes with multiple people before and kind of gotten like a collective general answer. But it was cemented because I heard a completely different group of people having the same conversation and reaching the same conclusion. And it just kind of pisses me off. And I feel like I just want to kind of get your 2 cents on it and see what you think. This is the only place that the state of Texas is the only place I've ever coached. The 1 year GAing at the Division II level, coaching high school football. This is the only demographic of high school football that I know. And for years, I asked the question about why certain levels of college football don't recruit more Texas kids. And I get it. Like, when you look at a kid, I think that it's a pretty straightforward set of measurables when it comes to putting a recruit into the Division I category. I think that that's, for the most part, with a high degree of accuracy, you can follow that standard measurable list and go from there. But I think at the, D2, D3 NAI level, I think it's much more complex. and for years saw kids who I felt could play at those levels just not even get the time of day, or even like FCS programs, Formula 1 AA, not even get the time of day, and couldn't figure out why, because they had better stats, they had better measurables in the weight room, they had good size, they had all these things, and they're just getting completely glossed over. And don't want to expose any sources or anything, but I talked to quite a few people and came to the same general consensus of Texas high school kids, football players, are punished in recruiting because of how high quality the product is here. And I think that's garbage. Right, wrong, or indifferent. Flat out heard another group of college coaches talking about, if you got a kid highly tuned, highly refined, versus another kid, they have the same height, weight, speed, but that this guy has been a machine perfecting those measurables versus this guy who just kind of shows up and does it and has not been in a structured environment, that not 10 times out of 10, they're going to take this diamond in the rough. And these polished kids that have spent, decades of their life fine tuning their abilities to play the game being just glossed over for Division II, Division III football, to me is just ignorant. And I don't understand it. I get it at the Division I level. I totally understand that, because you're going to develop them, foster. If the ceiling's higher, you obviously want to take that chance. But at the Division II level, you should be looking for kids that can be held, that can be expected to be accountable for their actions, that understand the workload, et cetera, et cetera. And I don't understand it. And I'm just curious your thoughts.
Yeah. Division One. I never believed in a kid being tapped out is what they call it. I never really believed in that. Started to see a little bit of it as I got into the college world. So to a degree, I do believe in that. It's like at the Division I level, like I get it. But to your point, at the Division II, yeah, there is no excuse. Like, if you look at Oklahoma's roster, and it's like a bunch of Texas guys. Like, to me, if you're a Division II school, like it should be a bunch of Texas kids that, whether they were the starters or they were the backups, like it's what it should be. And now I get it. Nowadays, it's going to be even less than that because of the portal. You'd rather go get experience than an 18-year-old kid. And so we're going to see even less of that stuff now, unfortunately. But there is no excuse. I agree with you from a Division II, Division III perspective. If these people are smart at those levels, they'll go get the kid that knows, who's basically already been in a college program, even though he's been in high school, and plug. Like, the whole purpose to me is plug and play. Like, that's the advantage of a kid that you get from Texas, so long that he physically does not have to redshirt or something like that, is you have more of ability with a kid from Texas to plug and play than you do with an unrefined kid from wherever, Florida, right, or California, wherever, like, you name it. Like, and so, because there is like that, there is the judgment of like, the Texas versus the Florida versus California, whatever. And so I think you got to do a good job looking at your roster and saying, oh, what do we need? We need a bunch of guys that can come in right now and play with structure and do what we tell them to do. Okay, we'll go get a bunch of Texas kids that have been in that, been at your Denton Geyers, been at your Denton Ryans, been at your South Lake Carrolls, because they've basically been in a college program for 4 years, and they'll be plug and play. And then, if we've got to take 5 guys, we'll take 3 of those, and then the other 2, those are your, malleable pieces of clay that you can, mold over the next couple of years that might end up being better than those Texas kids. But until you have the structure of what you want, go get those structure of the kids.
If I'm watching the state of Texas play football, and a kid is good enough to start at a position, I don't care which one. I don't care about postseason accolades. If he's good enough to start at Aledo, Denton Ryan, Denton Geyer, Duncanville, DeSoto, Westlake, North Shore, if he's good enough to start at one of those and he shows any interest in playing college football and you're Division II, why are you not talking to him?
Yeah.
You can't tell me that a 5'11 receiver from North Shore who has played in 47 high school football games in his high school career can't come in and immediately or in a year help your program. You can't tell me that just because you look at his track times, it's like, but he only ran 11.1 or he only ran 10.9. And it's like, okay, but he doesn't get caught on the field and he's good enough to start for a team that's won how many state championships and played this many games. To me, I think that you're recruiting scared. Because you think that you got to be able to sell these pieces on like, oh, he's so raw and like he's got this ton of upside, and it's like, or sell him on the fact that like, hey, he's a really good football player. How do we know he's a good football player? Because he's played good football.
Yeah. Yep. I agree.